Frontstretch.com, and I'm here with Jordan Anderson, the owner of Jordan Anderson Racing. Jordan, it's been 6 months since what happened at Talladega. That big incident that occurred, and the world just kind of seemed to stop turning. The NASCAR world, I want to say, kind of stopped turning as they saw what happened. But first off, you look great. I talked to you in Daytona, and you look. It's as if nothing really happened. But I really wanted to go back and talk to you about your recovery since. So first, take me back to that incident. Take me back to that race. What happened in that moment? I want to say it was turn one. When you what first happened when you realized something was wrong?
Yeah, probably deep down, my first instinct was to be upset because we were running so good that day. It was a big weekend for us. I hadn't run, I think that was my fourth or fifth race in the truck I'd run that year. So having limited opportunities, you want to make the most of it. And we showed up, qualified top 10, and we were running fourth at the time, and had a really, really fast truck, and just was trying to take our time and be smart and patient throughout the race. And lost oil pressure, and I just could tell I was losing power, and could tell I was getting ready to lose the draft. So, in my mind, I'm preparing to get down the apron, try and get out of the way, but not knowing what was happening, whether it was, mechanical, motor, oil. You don't know what's going to happen when you get down the corner. So you don't know whether you're going to spin out, catch fire, wreck, or you just slowly come to a stop. So kind of prepared for anything, but saw the fire at the floorboard when it first happened and didn't think anything of it. Just kept going, slowing down, get out of the way. And the next thing I knew, it was like, man, it's getting hot. And there's, sitting here talking about it, we could talk about it for 5 or 10 minutes, but it happened so quick. But at the time, it felt like time really kind of slowed down a little bit. So as the fire was coming up, I could see it first, and then I started to feel it, and it was like, man, it's getting hot. It's getting real hot. I got to get out of here. And that's why I think you probably go back and watch. You see me actually kind of pop up first when it was still in the banking, and that was just needed to get a break from it. Because in my head, I'm like, whatever's outside this truck is better than just sitting here inside of it. Just because it just racing my whole life. I mean, I've run over 100 truck races and never had anything like that. As a racer, we know that danger and fire and all that stuff is potentially there, but we just try to block it out, not think about it. And it's kind of one of those things that as it happened, it didn't seem real, like it was happening, but in my head, I'd almost blocked it out that it wasn't happening. And then it was like the real moment of like, fire is so hot that it's going to force me out of this truck. And it's just crazy to think back about it, just because I just never thought about it or felt or experienced anything like that to that nature. But it just got so hot in there that it was just unbearable. And I usually have a pretty good pain tolerance. I mean, I've knocked my front 6 teeth are fake. I've broken my kneecap, tore a rotator cuff, broke my wrist, fingers, toes, arm, you name it. I mean, I've got probably 14, 15 bones I've broken, and just growing up doing BMX and just being a little bit of a daredevil growing up, I had plenty of injuries, but never gotten burned to that extent. And the amount of pain that was just nuts. So that's why after this whole thing happened, my feeling for empathy for burn victims is just, I just can't imagine. I had just a taste of it, my arm and my neck and face. People that get their body and legs and big parts of their stuff burned. It just I can't imagine it. Just thinking back on that whole thing as it was going on, you got to think about the fact that there's 30 trucks behind you at that point. So I started going, and you actually see at one point when the truck veered back to the right, to the left, steering wheel was already off at that point because I'd already tried to come out. So there was no steering, but I knew I needed to get it slowed down and get out of there, because when I first popped up, I'm like, going too fast. So that's when I went back in and jabbed the brakes as hard as I could, and it turned left, right, and it just, by the grace of God, nobody hit me, because I came literally right back up in front of the field. And thinking back on that deal, I could kind of see where I was going. I couldn't see out the front, but I could see out the left because the window net was down. So as it's coming back to the infield, I'm like, you know what, if I can aim toward the wall and be here ready to go out, that's probably my best bet. So I knew where I was, I knew kind of where I was going, and the plan was just to try to be close to getting out, so I didn't want to get trapped, because I knew the backstretch wall at Talladega was pretty tall, and the backstretch wall on a lot of these tracks is pretty tall. I just didn't want to get to the point where I was up against the wall pinned in it. So I was like, I'm just going to sit here on the edge, and I wish I could say that I was that coordinated that way. It ejected me out of there. I landed right in between the safety barriers, because you got to think, the safer walls, there's probably 4 feet in between each foam barrier. And when I came out of the truck, I landed right on top of one. Thank God it wasn't in the middle of one or sideways or something. So just that whole thing, and I kind of go back to thinking what my father-in-law Larry said, that more right went wrong in that whole situation out of the truck. That certainly could have been a lot worse in a lot of different scenarios.
I find it really funny that you mentioned all of these wild injuries that you've gotten. You called yourself I like to think of it as like a stuntman.
Yeah.
Like you just like you did all these all this crazy extreme sports stuff, and you mentioned BMXing. But have you looked back? Like you said, you didn't even notice that you were climbing out while it was moving. Was that correct?
Yeah. I mean, jumping out of it wasn't
right.
That seemed better than sitting in the truck.
Yeah. In my mind, I was like, that's pure adrenaline when I first saw that.
Yeah.
But I also have to think, that's like stuntman stuff. Have you looked back? What was your reaction when you looked back and you realized that thing was still moving towards the wall as you were getting out of the truck?
Yeah, that was. So I'm in the hospital, and it's that whole kind of scenario as everything was happening. I remember climbing on the back of the truck, and it's funny how you remember little things like this. So I'm on the wall, and I'm still, when you talk about the adrenaline just had to be through the roof at this point, and I'm on the wall walking to the back of the truck, and I almost stepped on the back of the truck to go over it, and like in that split second I was like, no, I don't want to mess the truck up, so I'm going to walk along the wall so I don't step on the deck lid and mess it up. So that's like the racer and owner of me coming out like, the truck's already messed up enough, I don't want to make it worse. But you can see when I jumped down to the ground, everything just kind of like overwhelming, like just felt like my whole body was just on fire. And then that's when I went to my knees. And I remember the group of doctors that were first to me on the backstretch. I forget her name, the first doctor that was to me with NASCAR, but she was fantastic, talking me through the whole thing. Hey, we're going to cut your suit off, you're going to be all right, the ambulance is coming, we're going to get you out of here. And just remember that. I remember waking up in the care center because I was kind of touch and go there for a little while in the care center, and they were kind of evaluating everything. And the worst part about it was it felt like everything was really hot, but the face burn was the worst. It was real bad along my neck. They got my cheeks, my nose, my lips, all that stuff. So it just felt like this was on fire. And of course, at the time, they didn't know what other injuries I had, so I had a neck brace on, and they had the oxygen on me, and they've got to have those things on there, but that's where the most pain was around my neck, and that where the neck brace was. There's a lot of stuff going on, and thankfully they gave me an IV, and I kind of got some relief there. And I remember going out to the helicopter, in the helicopter, and I had to, when I met the pilot of the helicopter, I actually met him at the NASCAR summit back in January, and him and I got to share a laugh out of this because I was maybe a little bit stubborn on the way to the not to the airport, but to the hospital there where the landing pad is, because they wanted to keep the oxygen and neck brace on me, and I tried to take this off, and I think they juiced up my IV a little bit and had me go to sleep, because the next thing I knew, I remember waking up in the hospital, and I woke up in the what's the tube they roll you in? I forget what it was they were checking out, but they rolled me in there to run a couple scans, and I remember coming out of there kind of coming to a little bit, and the first thing I asked for was like, hey, somebody show me what happened. I want to see the replay of it. So, I mean, I can go back and I've searched YouTube and TikTok for all the different angles, and Twitter and Facebook to find different shots and videos. I found a couple people from the grandstands that posted it. It's just kind of surreal going back and watching it. But for me, I mean, the way I look at it is it's watching it doesn't bother me, because I just feel very blessed and thankful that I'm here today, and things weren't worse, because could have gone a different way, could have been a lot worse. I mean, being able to stand here today, I've got a couple marks, on my neck, and still got them up my arm and a couple of places there, but all things considered, just very thankful that the healing process was as good as it was. And I mean, a lot of credit to my wife. She was there. Thankfully, she was there that weekend. She actually hadn't planned to be there, but she was there at the track, and her work gave her, she took 3 weeks off of work, and took care of me there at the house. And that process, it started there at the hospital, where they got to scrub the burns, scrub them real good, get everything out of there, and then we had to continue that process for another week of every day scrubbing the burns, cleaning it, putting the topical solution on there, and trying to keep everything clean. And that was probably the worst part, was the aftermath. Like, during the moment, the burns and everything was there, but the week after was that pain was the worst, because then it got to the healing process of, not to get too gruesome, but then it's like, all right, the skin's starting to come off, and you've got to pull it off, and then it starts to bubble up. You've got to pop it, pull that off. So I mean, it was a lot of trips to the hospital to get that stuff taken care of. But the worst part about the whole thing was they told me, like, you got to get back shaving. So like, I got third-degree burns on my neck everywhere, and they're like, 2 days later, like, you need to start shaving so you don't get ingrown hairs and all that stuff. So going through that, even getting in the shower, you know, water touching the burns, all that stuff. I mean, it just, like I said, my empathy and respect for people that go through burns like that have it so much more. I mean, I can't imagine. I'm just thankful that it's over. Don't have to do that anymore. But I think a lot of hopefully good came out of it in our sport, because it was kind of heightened our awareness of the potential of fires. You've seen some of the stuff with on the Cup side, you know, the rockers and stuff catching on fire there. You just don't ever know what could happen. I mean, that's the thing that we as racers somehow have happen is like, oh, that'll never happen, or there's no way. I mean, I saw somebody posted a video of Steve Grissom's crash from here back in like 96, 97 when he backed in the inside wall and his fuel cell came out, fire everywhere. Like, who would have thought he'd hit the wall at that angle? Or Gordon when he had that crash in Vegas where he hit that opening. Like, there's so many weird spots in racing that sometimes things can happen that we don't think will ever happen. But now they've gone to, you know, mandating that all the drivers have to wear the head sock or the helmet skirt, have the underwear. You know, everybody on Twitter went crazy, like, oh, the driver's not wearing underwear. It's like, not your boxers, but like, you know, your undershirt, the long pants, the fireproof socks, all that stuff. And you know, thankfully that day I had the fireproof socks on, I had the fireproof undershirt on, I had a half skirt on my helmet. I didn't have the whole skirt, and that's where it got to my neck right there. But you know, I've been racing my whole life and never had that issue until that moment. And it's like now, you know, hopefully me going through all that will help prevent some other driver down the road from having to deal through that. Because you know, racers, I would say we're a little stubborn, but hopefully that opened up some of our eyes to like, hey, this stuff can potentially happen. So you know, if what happened there keeps somebody else safe down the road, I'm all for it. So you know, that's kind of cool to see. But the whole thing was a freak deal. You know, everybody, it was between, people thought different things, but a piece of debris came off the racetrack and slit that main oil line at the front of the Elmore motor. And you got to think you've got a gallon of oil in the oil cooler, another 3-4 gallons in the oil tank, and so you got 5-6 gallons of oil dumping on the headers on the right side. All that fire coming out. Came out of the wheel well, and then on the speedways we run windows on the right side of the trucks. I had a NACA duck right at the right front that had a hose pointed at me for fresh air, which during the race was great, but when you got fire coming out of the right front, it was like a vacuum that turned into you know, basically a torch pointed right at me that came in the right side, and then it came out and escaped out the driver window, which is crazy. Like, you look at the window net, how torched it was, and you could see where the fire came in, and it all was going over me, burned the seat, burned everything on the left side. So just crazy how it all went down. But you know, hindsight, looking at it all, just very thankful to be here and you know, have a story to tell about it. You know, as a driver, as my kind of career has taken the path of progressing more into the owner role, you know, I can really appreciate how important it is to keep my drivers safe now. With Jeb and Parker out there racing now, I mean, I get on our interior guys, from everything from seats to where we put our roll bar padding to our fire bottles to what our drivers wear. I mean, Impact Racing Products has been with me. I've been wearing their stuff since 2008, and will wear their stuff for the rest of my life, and my drivers will, because the stuff did what it was supposed to do. I mean, I was in that car for 25, 26 seconds. That stuff's really only rated for 15, 16 seconds. So it went above and beyond. That kept my body safe. And looking at where I had burns in the suit, you know, I had the suit up there at PRI, and it was pretty cool. Impact stitched it back together where they cut it out, and seeing how hot it got in some areas where I didn't really even have any burns, I was like, man, I'm pretty thankful for that. So
how hot did it get?
It got very hot. I don't know exactly the temperature that was in there, but you know, there were certain parts of the suit that just stuff was melting off of it, but it didn't penetrate through the suit. So it was pretty cool to look at.
So how long were you in the hospital for?
Just that night. Yeah. I think I got released. It was probably midnight that night, and you know, that's where the cool part of our sport comes out. Is Larry and Linda, Kendall's parents, had flown down there.
Oh shit!
Had
Oh my God!
flowed down there.
They're watching the truck race in there.
And so we had this thing going on to where they flew down there and came to the hospital that night, and they were down there. My dad was there. Kendall was there. It's always something here at the racetrack.
Oh, yeah.
Have truck racing.
Something happened in truck racing.
So Anyway, where I was going, I lost my train of thought.
Oh,
So what happened was
sport
we're in
getting
the
out at
hospital.
midnight.
Larry and Linda flew down there. My dad was there. Kendall was there. And what was pretty crazy is John Bomarito, Chuck Walsh were at the Petite Maman at Road Atlanta.
Mhm.
They got in a plane, flew to Alabama. Brandon, my brother-in-law, was spotting the Xfinity race. He was supposed to spot the truck race, or spotting the truck race. He was supposed to spot the Xfinity race. He left to come to the hospital. Everybody that showed up. Bobby Roos came down there. Bobby Roos actually brought me fresh clothes. He went to his house because he lives down there outside of Auburn. Brought clothes for me to change into because all my stuff was still at the track. And we had drove down to Talladega that weekend, and so we were preparing to drive back that night. And I guess Dale Jr. heard about what was going on and offered his plane up, and we all hopped in the plane and flew back to Statesville. So that was just so kind of him to offer it out there because we were going to drive home that night. So it was just cool that everybody reached out, and the aftermath of that, the weeks after it, you work so hard in the sport. I mean, I come from pretty humble beginnings of, when I first started on the Truck Series with Mike Harmon, and Mike gave me an opportunity to go race. It was a struggle to get the track every week. It was a victory for us just to get here, every week. So to fight through all that, and fight through all the races, and fight everything we did to get to where we were running more competitive with our truck stuff, to now have our Xfinity team, you hope that along the way people respect what you're trying to do. And I've always tried to, do everything I do with integrity, do the right thing, the best of my ability. I mean, trust me, I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, but I've tried to learn from them and do better the next time. So you just hope that people respect that and appreciate and like you. It's a very competitive sport, so everybody's not always going to like you, especially as a driver. But you just hope for the most part people like what it is you're doing and respect what you're trying to do. And the amount of people that reached out, called, text, people that I hadn't talked to in years, people I didn't know that knew who I was, reached out, offered, condolences, prayers, well wishes, and that was the coolest part of seeing. I mean, I got probably 1,500 text messages in a week after that whole deal, and seeing everybody on Twitter and Facebook that reached out. So it was pretty humbling to see all that and to feel that, and that was fuel to push through all that stuff to get better and get back healed up. And to be at Martinsville a few weeks later, I came up for just the race, and everybody came up and spoke to me was pretty cool. So thankfully, about 90% healed up now through all that stuff, and pretty crazy to look back through it all. I mean, that's the burns were pretty wild to get through. I got a concussion. That was one thing I really didn't talk about much through it. I got a concussion through it. When I got thrown out, I guess, from the whiplash, and that was almost as bad as the burns, because it was like maybe an invisible injury that I got, because I remember coming home that night, slept the next day, and then that Monday, just laid on the couch, watched TV, tried to relax a little bit, looked at my phone, and then that night, 9, 10 o'clock, I felt like my head was going to explode. And went back to the emergency room that night, that Monday after the incident, and did a bunch of tests, and that's when we found out that, had the pretty serious concussion, some other stuff through that, had gotten dehydrated from all the burns and everything that's going on with that. So went to the hospital 3 or 4 more times that week for follow-up stuff, trying to figure out what was going on there. And the concussion stuff was just frustrating. I probably had some over the years, but that one there was one that it just took me a couple weeks to get back to where I was fully functional through some of that stuff, and that was something that wasn't too fun to deal with. Just trying to process and get back to speed.
All right.
Simple things like trying to type on a computer or phone, and what you're trying to do and think you do is not adding up to what's popping up on the screen. So thankfully worked through all that stuff, but just very humble and thankful to everybody that reached out, and all the prayers and everything. I just feel very humbled that I'm a big faith guy, and I feel like that God had a reason for that happening and bringing me through it, and that's just added to the testimony of where we're at, what's going on now, and with the team growing the way it is, it's incredible. I mean, it really, like last week in Phoenix, they qualified 15th and 16th. To have both of our cars that high up on the grid was so cool. Daytona finishing 4th and 11th, that was amazing. So this was a big jump of leap of faith to go to 2 this year. But Jeb and Parker have done a phenomenal job. They listen, they see the big picture of what we're trying to grow here, and they respect the importance of bringing cars some in one piece so we can make it better the following week. And they see the big picture of what we're trying to do here. They both have been really awesome with that, and they're both racers. So it's been fun to work with them, and the itch is still there for me to run. Everybody's like, when do you get back in the truck or the car and all this stuff? And but I've kind of had to take my desires and kind of put them on. I don't want to say my desires, but my race career, put it on hold to grow this team. This is something that's bigger than where I thought it was going to go. Eventually, who knows where it could go. But I started this team in 2018 just as a way for me to race, and it's evolved into 20 plus guys working in the shop. Jeb and Parker making their career and the opportunities they have, and all the sponsors involved. So it's just kind of crazy to see how much it's grown. But it's pretty crazy to see where it started and what it might grow to, and the opportunities that are out there. But I've still got the itch. I've Impact made me another suit this year. I've got other helmets in the shop, so don't know when that race will be. I would love to get back to Daytona or Talladega, and I love the speedway races. And maybe pick a couple short tracks and be able to run those. The cool thing is, at least I know when I go race, I'll have some good equipment to go run in and be able to knock the rust off. So, I want to get back to just being able to have some fun. I've got a dirt late model I sponsored in South Carolina, helping them out some, so I may hop back in a dirt late model at some point. So, who knows where it may go, but it's pretty exciting to see, all we've gone through and where we are today.
Do you think that at some point you will field another truck race at some point this year, even if it's not for you?
I still got that truck. I still have that truck.
Still got the burnt out truck?
We haven't touched it. We pulled the motor out of it, and I've got a storage shop down the road from our main shop, and we rolled it over in a corner and put a cover on it. It's still sitting there, just it came off the racetrack. So, I'd actually reached out. I didn't know. I think we'd had some conversation about it going on display somewhere, but it's actually just still sitting there, and it's actually the suspension front clip. It's not in bad shape. It's obviously needs to get blasted, new paint, needs a new A-post forward on the body, but that truck was fast. That was a truck that I finished second with in Daytona both those years. I think it finished 6th in Talladega, 11th the year before, and then it was running as good as we were there. So, man, if we have some time this year to go through that truck, it'd be really cool to take it back to Talladega later this year. So I wouldn't write that one off the potential list of things to do.
Gotcha. You mentioned that 90% of you is healed. What's the 10% that's still being healed right now?
Just a couple of the burns and stuff that on my neck.
Sorry, I messed y'all's interview.
No, you're
All
okay.
right, good.
Was that you? What happened?
I got excited. I was watching late night.
No.
Jeb, get
Oh,
fired
okay.
up.
I was like,
They
damn, we're missing
crashed.
something big.
There was a huge crash.
Oh, was there? Well, that'll be a sidebar.
Yeah, so thankfully all the concussion stuff sealed up, but I just still got some stuff on my neck and my arms that just probably have some scars there for a while. So may try to go back to hospital. They got some laser stuff to help with some of that stuff, but just a few spots still like to try to get through. But thankfully everything on my face part is pretty healed up for the most part. So pretty thankful. That's really all it is, though.
I hate to go back to it, but you already mentioned that you had to shave again. You had to disgustingly pull the skin off at some points. Can you give me a little bit more detail of your recovery? Like, what was first? What happened next? Like, what was kind of the schedule of your recovery?
Yeah, I mean, that just, my wife, she was an all-star through that whole process because I was not one to do any of it. She's like, all right, here's what we're doing. Here's what the doctor said we're doing today. And she's a lot like her dad in that she makes her points and she goes through it. She follows through. I'm very easygoing, go by the seat of my pants, but she's very scheduled to the point on the time. And we went through all that stuff, and just keeping it clean was the biggest thing. Keeping it clean, keeping the appointment on it. There's a picture somewhere I sent to my dad of trying to pull skin off, using scissors to pull it off, and just stuff like that. So tried to find some humor in it somewhere to just kind of deal with everything that was going on. So it just was quite a process to get through all that stuff. But had a great group of doctors that gave us steps and routines on what to do. And my mom and dad and Kendall's parents were there. Pretty cool old people that came. We didn't have to grocery shop for about a month after that from all the food people dropped off at our house. But just quite a process of keeping that stuff clean. That's the biggest thing, and just that was the biggest thing. I was just trying to make sure it stayed clean.
Well, Jordan, finally, I know you already mentioned that you want to think about maybe running a truck later this year. Probably at Talladega and whatnot. Is there any chance we could see you maybe building a third car in the Xfinity Series? Like, I know you said you got the itch to get back in.
Yeah, no, we've got the third hauler now, and we've got some equipment. I just want to make sure that we put the main focus on 27 and 31. Right. It's got to get up and off the ground good. And if I joke with Jeb Parker, so if you guys get through Daytona with 2 cars, 1 piece, I may go around Daytona, this summer. And that was the first thing both of them said. Like, all right, boss, we got your cars now. So that's one thing we kind of talked about there in the shop. But again, the main focus is keeping these 2 teams with the inventory and the parts they have, and if the opportunity is there for us to do it 100%, you may see me pop back out in there. Don't know what number it's going to be, but it'd be cool to go out there and race with these guys, have some fun with them.
Well, finally, what's it like working with Parker and Jeb? Jeb, we just heard, is super excited. Very obviously, is very excited about. I guess it's a late model race he's driving, but Parker is a young talent. He seems to be just one of those up and coming guys that kind of flew under the radar, but now he's here in the Xfinity Series. What's it like having those guys drive for you?
It's cool. So Jeb, we've actually got Andrew Patterson that works for us in the shop. Andrew's been working with me for 2.5 years now, and Andrew is now driving Jeb's late model. They're racing up at South Boston today. Andrew's making his debut in a late model, driving the 31 car up there. So it's pretty cool how small the world it is that Andrew had the opportunity to go race for Jeb. And Jeb is, he's the wild card. I love working with him. He's lots of energy, lots of, passion to succeed, and he hustles. Like I appreciate how hard he works on all his sponsorship stuff. I see a lot of what I fight, what I went through, and what he's doing, and what he's got. He does a great job in all the relationships that he builds with the sponsors, and how hard he works to be here every week. So seeing that firsthand, I really love that and appreciate that about him. And he's a great shoe. I mean, at every lap, he's giving it 110%. And Parker, he's just a natural talent. Great opportunity with Funkaway coming in to sponsor him and put a full season together. And I forget sometimes he's 19 years old. I'm like, man, what are you doing here? And I forget he's 19. But it's so cool because we've got like Jeb, veteran, Parker, the rookie, the best of both worlds working together. They both get along really well, which is awesome to see. And I really pushed hard for them to do that, for them to talk to each other, pick each other's brains. So, really thankful I got two good guys that are working together to make this thing happen. But they're both very talented. Both their setups are pretty similar, which has been a big help. Shane Whitbeck, crew chief for 31, is with Jeb on the 27. We've got Josh Graham. This is his first year crew chief with Parker. So we got two rookies paired up together, working together, and they both have synced really well. So that's the big thing. Is this team doesn't exist without good people, and I'm very thankful that I got a great group of guys that really work their tails off in the shop, that put a lot of heart and soul into this team, and see the big picture. Like, they're not just building race cars, they're building race cars above and beyond what's expected of them, because they're just as hungry as I am to see this thing succeed, and they realize what it takes to get to the next level. And all these guys push for that level as well. They expect nothing but excellence. And, we keep doing that every week, keep showing up with that same quality in our cars and our equipment. Eventually, we're just going to keep taking a notch up that way. And it's not like we stepped in and bought it. We're figuring out a lot of stuff along the way and kind of doing it a little bit on our own to a degree. But it's pretty cool when you just see your stuff run good. And hopefully, we can just keep learning. This is a big learning year for us. And I admit there's times where the learning curve is shorter, and sometimes it's.
Hey everyone, Zane Smith, driver number 38 Ford for Front Row Motorsports. Be sure to subscribe to Frontstretch on YouTube.